Welcome to Your Ghana, My Ghana on Graphic Online TV. I am Dede Amano Wilkes. Now, coffee and cocoa are two of the most traded and consumed commodities in the world. And today we're exploring the fascinating story of Meron Dagnew, an Ethiopian-Ghanaian entrepreneur who is determined to revolutionize the coffee and cocoa industries from the east to the west of Africa. Meron Dagnew is the founder of a company called B Collective and currently the majority partner and chair of the company's advisory board. Welcome to the studio, Meron Dagnew.
Thank you, Dede. Appreciate you.
Meron, you've lived your life between Addis Ababa, New York, and Accra. Let's begin with your journey.
Sure.
How did you go from coffee-loving Ethiopian to successful entrepreneur in Accra?
Well, there's a bit of twist in that story, but my story began, like you said, in Addis Ababa. I was born in the capital of Ethiopia, so the capital of Africa, the seat of the African Union. Then in 12th grade, I had the opportunity to get a scholarship in New York. So I left. And
12th grade would have made you...
I was actually 15 years
right.
old. Yes. I skipped a couple of grades. So at 15, I found myself in New York City. And then from there, my journey started. So I returned back to the continent again. I relocated back again in 2010, Western calendar. The Ethiopian calendar is a bit different. We have a different calendar. So 2010, I returned back to the continent. Worked a few years based in Addis as a major base, mostly in East African countries such as Rwanda, Kenya, Sudan, Somalia, etc. before I relocated to Ghana in 2018.
And tell us a little bit about the coffee and cocoa industries in Africa.
Well, coffee, from early memory on end, is one of the biggest GDP earners for Ethiopia. So you can't separate, not only it's the biggest GDP earner, it's also originates in Ethiopia. Actually, coffee, its original name was Kaffa, where actually the region where it actually originated.
Kaffa, in which part of Ethiopia?
It's in the southern west, in the Oromia region of Ethiopia.
And there's a lovely story about an Ethiopian
goat herder, actually.
Tell us
yes.
the story. Mm-hmm.
Goat herder.
Mm-hmm.
But then if we know a little bit about African history, we know that the Arabs were very much instrumental to be taking African products into the Mediterranean, into the European markets at the time. They were traders. And so as they were taking different goods and commodities into the West, they were asked what the product was. And then it's a mispronunciation of kaffa that became then coffee, and which the world knows the product, that name right now.
But tell us about the kaffa goat herd.
So the goat herder, just on his regular walks, as the story goes, noticed that the goat, while eating at that plant, just became very much energetic. He couldn't contain the goat. Skipping around, going up the mountains, very hard to manage for him. So then he took the plant with the beans to his wife and then said, you know, the goat, after eating this plant, these beans, is acting in a weird way. So he gave the plant and the bean to his wife, and then the wife was experimenting first the plant. So there's parts of Ethiopia right now actually who boil the coffee leaves and actually drink it. Which has also a very similar property to it. And then the wife figured out through experimentation that the beans had this aroma when they were roasted. And then obviously the next stories are, as we know, then it became one of the biggest commodities in the world because it has, you know.
So Ethiopia is a home of coffee.
Yes, it is.
And how did you become interested in cocoa?
So like I said, the story of coffee with Ethiopians is very much interlinked. You know, it's like air for us. So I even remember, you know, by heart, some of the songs I remember at 8 o'clock sharp, before the 8 o'clock news, as we were driving, as my father was driving us to school, at 5 to 8, there's this song that comes on that says, Yagabi Mirtachin Buna Buna, which means in Amharic, which is the main language in Ethiopia. It means our biggest GDP earner, coffee. So we know that if that song comes on, we're late for class. So it was ingrained from a young age that coffee and the story of Ethiopia were very much interlinked. And as such, as girls in Ethiopia, we're taught how to make the coffee ceremony at a very young age. So it has always been in my family.
Every Ethiopian drinks coffee.
Every Ethiopian drinks coffee. I mean, unlike other places where they don't.
In Ghana,
unlike cocoa products in Ghana, where, you know, most of the goods are exported out and then it comes back, you know, value added and change. We are drinkers and utilizers of our own commodity. We value add our own commodity, which was very different for me when I came to Ghana to realize that how it was not being used properly within the country. And then family were also, extended family as well, near family were also coffee farmers when I was growing up in the countryside. So coffee was ever present in my life. So when I came back again to Africa, I relocated back to Africa, and I was thinking of business, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. My highest disappointment was as a coffee drinker, as an addict of coffee, going into other parts of Africa after being raised in New York City and seeing all of these products marketed as African products. I had a very hard time finding African coffee in other African countries. Either they were Nestle or Starbucks coffee, and that, I think, is what set off my journey as an entrepreneur, to try to make African products for African people, for Africans, by Africans.
And you arrived back from New York to Africa. You arrived back in Addis Ababa at the very moment that the AfTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, was being set up. Was that serendipity, or did you spot an opportunity to make a difference?
No, it was serendipitous. So when I returned to Africa, I mean, I was a young woman in my late 20s, and I was trying to figure out, by trade, I'm a communication expert. So I was trying to figure out my footing. I hadn't had a job yet back in Africa. I had left when I was young. So I was trying to figure out on how to adjust myself. I wasn't sure if I wanted to just go back to this 8 to 5 schedule. If it was for that, I could have stayed back home. So as I was figuring out my way around due to another serendipitous occasion, I also speak different languages fluently, French being one of them. And then friends, old colleague friends from school actually recommended, hey, you know, there's interpretation possibility. You know, we're very much understaffed in Africa. The African Union is here. There aren't a lot of Ethiopian, you know, and African interpreters. They have to fly them out from Geneva or places like New York. Just for you to understand, Addis Ababa is the 3rd diplomatic city in the world. So the conferencing part takes a big chunk of it. So New York, Geneva, Addis is the 3rd one. So then I said, hey, there's an opportunity, a career field opportunity
so after coffee,
there.
It's conference.
It's conference interpretation. But that really opened the door for a lot of things for me to understand the socio-political aspect of an understanding of what's going on in the continent, because what we see on the outside and what happens on the inside is quite different. So as I started my journey as conference interpreter and the many meetings, whether it's as a freelance interpreter and the many meetings from UN, AU, the AFCTA was starting to be a conversation. And at that time, our former Prime Minister, may he rest in peace, Meles Zenawi, was one of the forerunners of that protocol, the AFCA protocol. So the idea just seemed so nice when we were hearing it from the head of states, the different African heads of states, and it made sense. How can a continent that does not trade among each other grow? If we're always having to export, you know, a very extractive industries and then bringing in everything that we needed, value added for extreme amount of money, that just was 101. It was like economics 101. That didn't make sense. So it was very exciting as I was interpreting in those conferences to have the notion that these kind of things are about to unroll. So it was at that time that I started reflecting, okay, what would be my role in this? So that was the onset of the idea for me at that time.
And you have this lovely story about when the AfTA was being set up and you entered the building, and what did you see that outraged you?
So forward again, I would say 10 years,
Okay. All right. Okay.
10 years or so. Yeah, because this is around 2011, 2012 is when these conversations were happening. Since then, lots of life stories moving around African countries. And then in 2021, I believe. 2021, the Ghanaian government had launched the AFCTA headquarters here. And then I was one of the first ones that made my way to see now the new headquarters of the
you're
AFCTA.
Talking about the office in Ghana,
The headquarters.
Not in Addis Ababa.
No, so the AFCTA
see.
headquarters,
Okay. Right.
I believe it was 2018, 2017. I believe President Nana Akufo chose the AFCTA as one of his major products to be, showcasing within the African. So it was pretty much supporting that project from the onset. So I guess there was a request to the African Union to host the AFCTA Secretariat in Ghana, away from the mother headquarters, which is in Addis Ababa. So that request was granted by the African Union. As such, the Ghanaian government made sure that it gave a building. I believe they also have land somewhere to be developing the future headquarters of the AFCTA. So in 2021, it was in Accra. So that building was being, and the program was being launched. I was one of them that came in. I think I masqueraded myself as a journalist or something like that. Just to be able to have access.
Okay. And what
so
happened?
I went in and there were all these flags that were present, some slogans of by Africans for Africans. I don't quite remember the slogan. It was very exciting. All the African flags, very much similar to what is presented in the African Union in Addis. And then I turn around, there's a small cafe at the lobby. And I go there and the tables were branded Illy coffee. And everything was branded Italy. And they were only offering Italy. Okay. And then they were offering, and I was like, what coffees do you have? And they were like, we have only Italy. And it was just, I don't quite remember what exactly I said after that, but I do remember I created some chaotic scenes.
And what happened as a result of that?
Well, I think many of the senior ones did agree that it was not a good image. And then after that, I think I supplied coffee to some of the AFCTA offices after that for a while. But for me, it was not just going in as an African, but the image is very important. I'm a communication expert. So we have to be able to stay in line. If we don't believe it, how can we make anybody else believe? So if it starts from the main headquarters as such, then what hope do African entrepreneurs have to be able to make this a reality and not just a dream?
Well, while we're on that topic of the coffee that you saw on display there, can you tell us a little about the coffee you brought in to show us today?
So this is
You're a roaster. You're a coffee roaster?
Yes. So I have partners. Yes, we roast these in Ethiopia. Yourself. So it's been
in
to
Ethiopia.
Yes.
Arabica coffee.
It is Ethiopian Arabica coffee.
And these are three different.
These are three different ones. We do have about 5. We're out of stock of the other 2. So that is Sidama beans from the Sidama region. Sidama region. Right. This is also Limu. Limu
so that means
coffee.
From Limu region?
It is actually from a region, not Limu. Limu is from a region from Jimma, around Jimma region. So this grows about 1,600 meters high. It has a very spicy, winey flavor. All of them. So there's close to about 190, 200 varieties of Arabica coffee present in Ethiopia alone.
Okay.
So
and how many do you roast?
About 5.
About
5 of them. And then we have also a mix, a house mix that we decide to a house blend. This one is Gucci from the Gucci area. Okay. So these are actually premium level coffee beans for coffee lovers. Most of them, I'm sure, will know. I prefer Gucci. Gucci has a very sweeter flavor, aftertaste to it. So these are whole beans, but we provide our coffee whole beans, roasted or grind. It depends on what you like.
But talking about the premium grade,
so
all Ethiopians drink coffee, several cups
a
day, you've explained to me. The premium grades, are they drunk by Ethiopians or are they exported?
So there's grade A, grade B. So premium just means that they're a bit more expensive and their taste is a bit more refined. So, I mean, coffee grading is an entire a science of its own. You know, people go to colleges to study about coffee. So there's grade A, and the grading system of coffee for the international market, when buyers buy like Starbucks and Nestle's, they import their coffees from places like Ethiopia, Brazil, and others. There's a specific grading. So there's grade A, grade B, and then there's other grades. So in Ethiopia, grade A coffee is solely for export purposes, solely for export, because then if you're allowing Ethiopians to be able to have access to that, they'll drink it all. So we need our GDP. No, we wouldn't. We would be drinking it all. But yeah, so grade B, when we do drink coffee in Ethiopia, it's anywhere between grade B coffees and lower. That is within the market in Ethiopia. So grade A is solely for export.
Okay. So going back to that issue of what you saw when you first entered the AFTA headquarters and you saw Italian coffee rather than African coffee, although we have great producers after Ethiopia, which is number one, Kenya, Tanzania, many of the East African countries, Rwanda.
Yes, for Arabica.
Uganda,
they also have
Arabica,
Robusta as well.
Okay,
Uganda
Arabica
also has Robusta, yeah.
Right, Robusta like Ghana. So if the value chain is skewed for historical reasons or whatever reasons, mainly historical, what will it take to change the narrative and to retain more of the profit within Africa?
Like I said, I mean, the two beans I work for now that I'm also an Ethiopian-Ghanaian and have lived in Ghana, I believe those two beans share not just similarity in terms of their looks, their taste, and their content. I believe a lot
the
of
two beans,
cocoa and coffee.
Right.
I think, again, coming back to the cocoa beans before I speak also about the coffee. As you know, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana added anywhere between 65 to 70% of the global intake of cocoa beans comes from these two countries, about close to 70%. 65 to 70%.
75 when you factor in Cameroon and Nigeria.
Cameroon. So let's say 65 to 70%. However, in terms of the global chocolate cocoa industry, we don't even make 5% of that, you know, how many $1 million annual industry. When we look at the coffee, we're assuming about approximately 13% of the global coffee intake comes from Ethiopia. 13. We don't even make 3% of the entire global industry. So where is the discrepancy? Obviously, the value added along the ladder chain, that's where most of the money is made. So it's pretty simple. If we are trying to make more from what we offer, then that means we have to focus on the value addition part of it. So many African countries, obviously, in their leadership have tried to promote industrialization as being the next step. So intra-trade and allowing and facilitating, that's what obviously the AFCTA is promising to do, facilitating anything that has to do with movement of goods, anything that has to do with tariffs, taxes, and other things that also impede entrepreneurs from doing business. I mean, it's nice on paper, and at first I believed 100% of it, but when you are an entrepreneur and you're actually on the ground working, there are other things other than tariffs that also preclude us from trading. Now you have to understand, especially when I started working with farmers, that's when I understood that for centuries and centuries, it was, Fulani women, Hausa women, all of these women, Afaris in Ethiopia and the east side of Africa, that have for centuries, if not millennia, have been trading internally. And about 65% of our industries in Africa are in the informal sector. So if these new protocols are not really keeping in consideration these people.
For example, women cross-border traders.
Women cross-border traders that have been for years, whether we're talking about rice, tomatoes, coffee, all of these goods that we have been trading, then we risk having these protocols not being really reflective of the people that we're trying to help. So that is my fear, especially now being involved at the ground level with farmers and different entrepreneurs, is, what they're saying is true. All of these things is in the name of these women, these men that are, crossing borders and so many challenges to be able to bring in some of these goods, but they're not really represented when it comes to the formal tables. So I think it's a big question that the AFCTA itself has to be able to answer. And as entrepreneurs, there's also extreme costs when it comes, like, for example, FDA certifications and stuff, not just the time it takes, the bureaucracy that exists to get our products approved at the quality level that is necessary for export, but it's a lot of costs. And many entrepreneurs, especially at the small, medium scale level, cannot afford, they just can't afford some of these extra costs. The next thing is logistics. I mean, it's much easier to fly and transport goods to the West and to Asia than it is to go between African countries. So that's also another big factor when it comes to affordability and in terms of trading African goods within Africa.
But your company, Be Collective, is doing some very inspiring work.
I mean,
tell us some of the success stories.
So success stories, like I said, challenges are the cost of logistics and others. Entry to market have been very hard, but there are great initiatives like the Guided Trade Initiative. I was not fortunate enough to attend the last one that was in Tanzania. I happen to be occupied in Ethiopia on personal matters, but I do intend to participate on the next one, the Guided Trade Initiative. The other big thing for us as African entrepreneurs is finding the market itself. You have to understand Western markets and Asian markets are very much had gone digital. A lot of the shopping is happening online, credit cards. Africa is not yet at that stage. So that means people have to go to stores, like it's actual physical products that are going, that people do still go to markets to buy products, which means that there needs to be an importer in a country of those goods, then there needs to be a distributor of those goods into the local market. So how would an entrepreneur, for example, me, small size entrepreneur, find those importers? How would we find those distributors and be able to bring in our products to the final end consumers? So this is, unless you have the money to go into that country, do your first market assessment and everything. And how many small African businesses can do that? So market entry is a very, very big challenge. For many small size entrepreneurs. So this Guided Initiative Trade is really an opportunity for many of us. So the Guided, just to be a little bit clear, the Guided Initiative Trade, I think the beginning was encompassing about 8 to 12 countries. Now, from what I've heard last, I think it's about 20, 30 or some countries that are participating that have already ratified and given their tariff offers into the AFCTA. So basically what it does, it selects for us in Ghana. So it selects about last time, I believe it was about 20-something companies from different commodities that are selling different commodities, value-added commodities, and it takes them to another African country for a week-long expo conferences where we get to meet potential importers, potential distributors, also introduce our products to the final end consumers on the ground. And it allows actually free shipping of our goods, about 85 to 100 kg of our goods. So that's a good opportunity for us small businesses to be able to find a new market in Africa.
Well, I believe we're going to be discussing some of these issues, hopefully, with the AFTA representative.
Hopefully, yes,
in the very near future. But tell us about some of your successes on the ground. You work with cooperatives here in Ghana.
Yes.
What sort of work have you been doing?
So when I was working with cocoa farmers in terms of getting, so I outsourced my chocolate processing. We're not yet at the capacity to be able to produce our own, so we outsource our manufacturing processes, the value addition part of it. However, I wanted to be sure that, because when we were trying to enter into the African market is not the only also market, even though that's my primary target. I'm also looking into diversifying into, obviously, international markets as well, because I realized, 2 years, 3 years on, and in the business, that the penetration of the African market was going to be a long-term process and not just a short-term. So we had to be flexible right away. As businesses, you can't just be, stagnant on something. You have to be able able to be flexible to adjust yourself in order to survive. So as such, I understood that we also have to be able to penetrate into international markets that were much more developed, easier market penetration, because like I said, digital aspect is very much there in order for us. We don't have to have a physical storefront. We could be online on Shopify, on Amazon, and be able to introduce our products. But in order to enter into those markets, when the international market is faced with African products, they add all of these certifications and all the others in order to satisfy them. They just want to make it harder. I mean, yes, to one end, we understand, it has to maintain the quality level of their Western-made products. But it's also another way of trying to discourage you, because some of these fees are extreme. So in order to satisfy some of the demands, and some of the demands are like things like transparency in terms of traceability is one of the things, because they want to make sure that it's not coming from like a child labor farm or any of these things. It has to be like child labor free, etc., like USDA certification and many others. So in order to do that, I wanted to know where my cocoa beans were coming from. And then if you're buying cocoa beans from the cocoa board, sometimes it gets hard to do traceability. So I wanted to work with some cooperatives.
Because they could come from anywhere.
They could come from anywhere else, and it's big quantity. It would be very hard to be like, okay, we want that cocoa beans. And that's a whole other science on its own. So I wanted to work with our processing plant to be able to work with some of the cooperatives that they were working with. So I went to the farms to meet the farmers and to know their stories. And it was at that time that I realized, specifically in the Volta region, that many of the cocoa farmers were actual coffee farmers as well, that they were diversifying their crops, mostly obviously Robusta beans.
Because cocoa is normally intercropped.
Yes. And then many of them in the Volta region. So I was very surprised, because I'm a coffee producer. So, but when I saw them, I mean, coffee in Ghana is at a very artisanal level. It has not yet developed to a point where Ethiopia is, for example. But on the flip side, Ethiopia is also not there when it comes to the cocoa, to the growing cocoa beans, processing cocoa beans, or anything like that. So I believe, the two C's, I call them my two C's, coffee and cocoa.
And when did Ethiopia start growing cocoa?
Well, actually, it has not until quite recently. Cocoa was not really.
At the forefront of this movement.
We are. I believe there's one more individual, that private farmer, private business person that started planting cocoa seedlings about 7 years ago. I think I met him once before I even moved to Ghana is actually when I met him. But in terms of really trying it at a commercial level, I would say yes, I am, and the partners that I'm working with. Yes, we can say we're pioneers of cocoa in the Ethiopian market. So when I came here and I was working with them, and I've documented this for years now, many of the coffee farmers here were like, we don't have a market. We have beans that we harvested about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that are in our, storage spaces just going bad. I mean, it rains, it's not stored in a proper, in a proper way. So they had a big issue in terms of finding buyers, finding markets. And then second, they don't also drink coffee themselves. So it was just, they were growing it. So I'm like, so why are you then growing it? But they're like, yeah, because we see in the international market, this is something that sells.
They were watching the prices.
They were watching the prices. And then I asked, so what are some of your challenges in terms of even growing it? And they said, well, we don't get, fertilizers and stuff from the government, because, you had to be established as a cooperative, registered in order to be dealing with like the cocoa board and others in an organized manner for you to be able to get fertilizers. So then I said, fine, let's get started. So I helped support most of them to be established in cooperatives. And then with some of the leaders from the cooperatives, we started seeing how we can also get different seedlings, better seedlings. First, we were thinking Arabica to bring it into that, and then taking Robusta to Ethiopia. And then we faced some difficulties with the soil soil and everything else. So then we said, okay, so we heard that there was also another being a Robusta, which was the mixing of Robusta, crossing between
Arabica
Robusta and Arabica. So yes.
But tell me, do people in Ethiopia, do they like Robusta coffee? Do they drink it?
I would say 90-something% of people don't even know about Robusta. Yeah, because there aren't any foreign coffee companies in Ethiopia. People just, like I said, get their produce from the local markets, and what they get from the local market is Ethiopian products, and that's what they would roast in their homes and drink. So the opportunity, like I would say rarely, unless you're like a bachelor who really does not have time, or a bachelorette for that reason, gender equality here. Everybody roasts their coffee at home. Very rarely would you find people in Ethiopia going into supermarkets and buying like a package. Everything is from scratch in a coffee ceremony. So many people would buy their own products. So for that reason, I doubt many people know about Robusta unless they're coffee connoisseurs and who prefer to have Robusta.
So why would you be exporting Robusta to Ethiopia?
In order to do mixes. Yes, for my export. It's not for the Ethiopian market, but it's mostly to do for my export.
And explain your name. Be Collective, what does that mean?
So Be Collective is in Ethiopia, Ghana, as well as the United States. I actually first founded Be Collective as a consulting company while I was still in New York. So Be Collective is the concept that in unity is strength. And, you know, I'm also a big enthusiast, Pan-Africanist, Kwame Nkrumah, you know, student that believes that in unity is strength, and that unless we come together, you know, we will not be able to figure out some of the challenges or bring solutions to some of the challenges that we face in the continent. So in everything that I do, I try to install that you know,
and you have this strong belief, don't you, Meron, that we should believe more in our resources in Africa, that we should invest more in ourselves?
Yes, yes. I'm a firm believer of that. Like I said, the resources of Africa we are very resource. We've been blessed enough to be resource rich. It is a blessing and a curse, I believe. It is
a natural resource curse.
Well, it is a blessing and a curse. It's two-sided knife. We didn't ask for it, but we were blessed for it. But then this puts us in a different, peculiar position when it comes to others that may want our resources. So as such, I believe, and I think it is a fact, it's not just my belief, that the resources of Africa have been the one that basically paved the way for the empires of the past of everywhere, whether it's Greece, Rome, or the UK. And I do believe that it is still going to be the resources of Africa that'll pave the way for future empires. So as such, you know, we could be the grass on which these elephants are fighting, or we can choose to be an elephant ourselves. I believe that is a mindset that we can choose. We do have free will. And I think that future generations, if not, you know, may look dim at times, especially seeing some of the leadership that we have in Africa recently. But I do still, I'm still an optimist to believe that there will be future generations that will do better than us.
That's a very powerful message, Meron.
I do think so.
And what's next for Be Collective, and how can our audience support your mission?
Buy our products, you know, buy our products. We will continue to try to provide quality made in Africa products. We will continue trying to go into the different countries. Just to let you know, since 2021, we now have penetrated the Kenyan market. We also are in Rwanda right now. We are about to enter the South African market. We are going to be in Morocco with our coffee. We were in Ethiopia with our cocoa until current foreign exchange problems, the lack of foreign exchange and stuff just put a little dent into our export of cocoa into Ethiopia, but we have not lost hope. We know the situation will get better. So we're growing in Africa. So it's passing on the word, knowing that there are people out there making made in Africa products for us Africans, for Africans by Africans products, and then also for our diaspora in the West, in Asia and Europe, is to try to support African brothers and sisters within the continent that are trying to promote these made in Africa products.
So inspiring. Thank you, Meron Dagnew.
Thank you again, Dede, for having me here.
For sharing these insights.
Thank you. Thank you again.
So let's continue the conversation in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe on Graphic Online TV's YouTube channel and also like and share. Thanks for watching this episode. Join us next time on Your Ghana, My Ghana for more stories of African entrepreneurship and innovation. Our guest today has been Meron Dagnew, founder of Be Collective, and I am Dede Amano-Wilkes. Bye for now.
For more news, please visit our website graphic.com.gh or follow us on Facebook at Daily Graphic and on YouTube and Twitter at GraphicGH.
Subscribe now.